Parents, what spooky past life memory did your kid utter? This installation deals with reincarnation and the crazy things children have said that even have me believing there is a possibility that reincarnation is possible. Grab some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy. When my daughter was 3 and starting to talk clearer, she was talking to someone and, concerned, I walked into the bedroom and no one was there. Initially I thought it was her playing with her toys. Days later the same scenario, but this time I asked who she was talking to and she replied, "Your grandma?" I thought she meant my mom who had recently passed, so I showed a pic of her and asked, "Is this her?" "No, your grandma," was the reply. I found a picture of my grandma and she with a big smile said, "Yes, her." I was shocked since I don't have pictures of my grandma displayed and she died in 1991 and my daughter born 2015. Not a parent, I remember telling my mom when I was about 3 about my royal family. I still have this cryptic memory of standing in a desert with a dark shallow pool, the sun was setting, and my younger brother reaches down and splashes the water in the pool, and everyone got very upset. There was something sacred about this pool. It has always been a lasting memory for me. I met someone when I was 16, and we stayed friends, and when we were 18 we talked about reincarnation, and he told me the exact same story only from the brother's perspective. I had never told him about my memory. Still freaks me out to this day. The following conversation happened between my wife and our youngest when she was 3 or 4. Daughter, I remember my old mommy. Wife, what? Daughter, like I was born, and then I was really cold. But then I woke up and you were my new mommy. And laid her head on my wife. My youngest was born with complications. She was intubated and spent 2 weeks in the NICU. So there's that. Not me, but some of my grandma's siblings died in a house fire around the 60s 70s. My mom's sister, around 15 to 25 at the time, was just talking with one of her cousin who was about 5 like 30 years ago, and the 5-year-old was really scared of fire, and acted a lot like one of my grandma's sisters, Tony. Then one day when my aunt reached over to light a candle, the 5-year-old cousin said, "Isn't it funny how last time we were sisters but now we're cousins?" It freaked my aunt right out apparently. Forgot to point this out, but 2 of my grandma's sisters died in the fire. In 2006 my best friend Nick was killed in action in Iraq. We used to wrestle and fight until one of us submitted. These sessions would start randomly and always be initiated by showing your fangs. This involved pointing your pointer and middle finger down in front of your mouth while growling at the other person. A couple of weeks after his death, some family from the other side of the country that we only see every 5 years or so was visiting. My cousin's son, who was about 5 and who I never met prior to this visit, comes over. He gives me the fangs and smiles. I asked him, "Where did you learn that?" He says, "Your friend says hi," and runs away. I went to my room and cried for a bit. Well, I'm not a parent, but I once told my mother, "I used to be your dad," when I was a toddler. And if that's not weird enough, he died about 9 months before I was born. When my daughter was 3, she saw a large ship while we were on vacation at the beach and said, "That's like the one my parents before you died on." I said, "You had other parents before us?" She calmly went on to explain that I shouldn't worry. They were her parents a long time before my husband and I were, but the ship they were on broke apart and they are still at the bottom of the ocean. She then said when her before parents died, she and her sister Brynella had to be separated because no one could take them both. She said her sister went to live in Australia, but she stayed in Ireland. We live in the US. Obligatory, not the parent but the kid here. Apparently used to have rather frequent bouts of nightmares back when I was 4, and it always began with me screaming the name Sarah, then calling for help loudly, which would wake pretty much everyone in the house up, and ending with me just blubbering out, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over and over again, all the while crying and sobbing. When I would wake up in the morning, I'd have no recollection about any of this. My parents had no idea what caused it, given that they knew no one named Sarah that I had interacted with. We had no TV or anything of the sort. I hadn't begun going to preschool yet, and didn't know how to read beyond a few simple words. Nothing they did seemed able to stop it either. The whole thing went on for a good long while, almost a year, until one day, it just sort of stopped. Mom apparently tried asking me once about it, and Kid Me said something to the effect of, "Sarah doesn't want to see me crying anymore. So I won't." Didn't actually know any of this happened until some years back when I got to talking to my parents about how I always found the name Sarah to be beautiful. My daughter, when she was 3, used to talk about her imaginary friend all the time. Said he was big and fun, and spent a lot of time playing with her. One day I was scanning old photos and had a photo of my father on my desk, and she said, "Hey, how did you get a photo of my friend?" I instantly got shivers down my spine. My father died in the house 15 years previously, and she played in a room that used to be his office. I cautiously asked her to tell me more about her friend, And without hesitating she told me he talked funny. The chill stopped me dead in my tracks because Dad was an Aussie who never lost his accent. My daughter, too, is absolutely terrified of the sound of planes. She's never been in one. Just really scared of the sound. Usually, she will hear one and come running and hide between my legs. One night a few months ago, though, she heard a plane, stopped playing and just said to herself, "They're here." A couple weeks later, she told my husband it was time to storm the beach. This kid has never been to a beach. When he was 3, my husband decided to treat our son to a flight over our city in a Cessna. When it was time to get on the plane, our boy climbed into the pilot's seat and was extremely upset when he was told he had to move. He began crying and saying he was sorry. He didn't mean to crash that plane last time and he said he'd be good this time. My husband managed to calm him by pointing out that his legs were too short for his feet to reach the pedals. Once he got settled in the back seat, he started fussing about not being able to use the radio, so the pilot got him a headset, just didn't plug it in all the way. Our son then started trying to raise the tower so he could do his radio check and get clearance. At that point the pilot needed to take a break. He went for a smoke while my husband talked to our son, who told him that he crashed the last plane he flew and a lot of people died. When the pilot got back, they were able to do the flight with no further issues. About a year later, we went to an aeronautics museum when an old Mosquito was being restored. Our son told the curator that he used to fly one of those, so he offered us a tour of the plane. When we got in, our son pointed out several things that were wrong with the plane, which turned out to be correct, things like the joystick being the wrong sort, etc. The curator told us the plane had previously been modernized and was now being restored to original condition. He also confirmed that the items our son had pointed out were in fact slated to be replaced. Our kid is grown now and doesn't remember ever being a pilot before and has absolute zero interest in planes, but he does remember just knowing things about airplanes and piloting them. Not me, but a friend's little sister. The whole family was out for dinner at a restaurant in a skiing village which they recently bought a cottage near. My friend's little sister, as soon as they walked in, said, "I know this place. My mother and I used to paint here." To which her mother replied, "We've never been here before. What do you mean?" She replied with, "No. My mother from before. We used to paint here all the time." The family was obviously a little freaked out, but didn't think much of it as she was pretty young and they figured just messing around. Later on though, when talking to the waitress, the little girl again adamantly mentioned how she used to paint there, and the waitress revealed that it in fact was an art studio for many years in the 1900s but had been converted sometime in the early 2000s into a restaurant. Needless to say, the entire table, waitress included, got goosebumps and were at a loss for words. Mine said that he had a dream he was in heaven, or some other place before he was born, with lots of men in suits who had lined up every woman on the planet, and the suits told him to pick who would be his mom. The part that creeped me out is I remember my mom telling me I had a dream exactly like that as a child. When he was around 4, my grandson used to talk about his job at the ice factory. One day he was talking about his boss Farvo and the day he quit. I asked him why he quit and he turned to me and quite passionately said, "I'll tell you why I quit. They made me work 15 days in a row without a break and I had enough of that." It was weird hearing all that righteous anger coming out of that little boy. My daughter just informed me that he was 3 when he always talked about working at the ice factory. So yeah, scary 3-year-olds. I had a brother pass away from brain cancer. At the time we had a cat who was a calico and just sort of knew he was battling something. She was really mean to most people, but with him she was gentle. He would grab her paws and she would just let it happen. Well, about 3 years after he passed, my parents had another child. Another boy. He was about 3 when he told my parents about the white, brown and black cat that used to let him grab her paws. She had died about a year before he was born. My younger sister, when she was 3, started talking to my mom about when I was a big girl, and you were a little girl. She said she went to my parents' wedding. She described her old self physically, and my mom says that sounded like my mom's grandmother Grace. My sister also talked about the greenhouse she used to live in at the end of a dirt road and the fact that her mother, my mom's great-grandmother Matilda, died from a snake bite while they lived there. She described the snake as pretty, and with the full description my mom thinks she was describing a copperhead. Now we lived in northern Nebraska, no copperheads, and Matilda died in southeast Oklahoma, Copperhead region. My sister said she killed the snake with a hoe. These discussions always took place at bedtime. One day, we were putting in the garden and my dad was sitting down and sharpening the hoe with a file, and my sister told him he was doing it wrong. He told her to show him how to do it. She put her hands on his and placed them in the correct position, and later he said that she was right, He was doing it wrong. For those of you interested in timelines, this would be in 1980, my mother's grandmother Grace died in 1968, and her great-grandmother Matilda died in 1902. Also, we don't know if snake bite was the cause of death for her great-grandmother Matilda. I was 15 at the time these little nightly discussions were going on, so I remember them fairly well. She probably told these things on and off for about 6 months, and by 4 she would say, "I'm tired of talking about it." From a message my ex sent me last year about our daughter who was 3 at the time. On hearing a motorbike, I had one before I was little, it went whoosh and then I had no legs and mommy and daddy had to help me, but I didn't, so I went to sleep and now I'm too little. When I was 3 I asked my mom if she remembered when I was a baby boy named Joshua. I am female. She said no, and I explained that I died after falling down the stairs. The crazy part is that my mom had a miscarriage before getting pregnant with me after falling down the stairs. When I was 3 I used to tell my mom stories about my other family every night before bed. The siblings I had and the dog too. One day she took me to Target and I told her I wanted big girl undies and she said she would buy them for me and I could wear them when I was potty trained. I told her that my other family already potty trained me so I can start wearing them now. I put them on that day and never had an accident after that. She never potty trained me and was just shocked. When my son was 4 we had driven past a cemetery. He asked me if I remembered when he died and was buried. I said no and asked him what he meant by saying that. He said he had died, was buried in a cemetery, and that's when he started growing in my belly. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up when he said this. He doesn't remember saying this. My middle son used to talk about having a different mom before me. He would say she was blonde and looked nice, but wasn't nice. He would bring it up randomly and only ever got a bit emotional when he would tell me that when he was with her, he never got to grow up. He said he chose me to be his mom this time because I would let him grow up and get old. When he would say the last part, it was as if he was looking for reassurance. He'd ask me like, "Right, Mom? I can grow up this time?" Really messed me up sometimes. Thank you for watching. Part 2 of the Past Life series is coming out later this week. Stay tuned.